Tonight, the music world is mourning the sudden death of Grammy-nominated rhythm and blues artist Angie Stone. The R&B singer was killed in a crash in Montgomery, Alabama on Saturday.
It's the music industry's darkest hour, as the case that has captivated the nation reaches its conclusion. Clive Davis has been sentenced in connection with Angie Stone's fatal crash.
The official report was that Angie Stone passed away in a Sprinter, and she was the only person in the Sprinter that passed away out of the 9 total passengers in the car.
A verdict that raises profound questions about power and corruption in the entertainment world. This verdict sends a message, states one industry insider. After prosecutors presented their case, the evidence suggests this wasn't just an accident. Forensic analysis of the vehicle points to tampering that goes far beyond coincidence. This case goes deeper than a tragic accident. It reveals a pattern that many industry veterans have long suspected, but few dare to expose. The details that emerge during the trial paint a disturbing picture of what happens when artists challenge the status quo. The prosecution's presentation methodically dismantled the accident narrative that initially surrounded Stone's death, despite early reports attributing the crash to brake failure. Digital evidence recovered from multiple sources suggests something more calculated occurred just days after she began questioning financial practices within the industry. She was systematically documenting irregularities in royalty payments, reveals a source who worked closely with the investigation. A recording recovered from her cloud storage captured her confronting Davis about missing royalties just 3 days before the incident. The timing raises serious questions about whether this was truly accidental. This evidence fundamentally challenges the initial accident explanation. If Stone was building a case against powerful industry figures, could her death have been more than unfortunate timing? Even more concerning are the inconsistencies in the timeline surrounding her final days. While initial reports described a simple car accident, on a rainy night, court testimony revealed Stone had been meticulously gathering financial records and seeking legal counsel for months. Everything about her behavior showed someone preparing for a significant legal battle, noted one witness during the trial. Her caution and documentation make the sudden crash scenario difficult to reconcile with her established patterns. As the investigation progressed, perhaps the most troubling discovery came from Stone's communications. In her final hours, she contacted me that morning, expressing concern for her safety, and close associate testified she specifically said she had received threats warning her to stop her inquiries. She told me, if anything happened, to investigate thoroughly. Her fear was palpable, yet she remained determined to proceed with her planned meeting with journalists. This raises the central question: what circumstances would lead someone fearful for their safety to travel alone on that particular route? The choice of road itself is suspicious, noted one investigator during testimony. It presents the perfect combination of minimal surveillance and maximum vulnerability. Was this route suggested to her? And if so, by whom? Before examining the trial itself, let's consider what investigators found at the crash scene, details that ultimately formed the foundation of the prosecution's case. Perhaps most significant was the absence of Stone's digital devices. Her laptop and phone were not recovered from the vehicle, states the official police report. Yet multiple witnesses confirmed she had both items with her earlier that day. These missing devices reportedly contained the documentation she had been gathering regarding financial discrepancies. The coincidental disappearance of precisely these items raised immediate red flags for investigators. The vehicle's diagnostic systems provided another crucial piece of evidence. Forensic analysis revealed unusual access patterns to the car's electronic systems. Shortly before the crash, the vehicle's braking and stability control systems showed evidence of external access. Approximately 17 minutes before the recorded impact, testified to automotive security expert. This type of intrusion requires specialized equipment and knowledge, certainly not something available to the average person. The question becomes who would have both the capability and the motivation to remotely compromise these systems. The timing of Stone's death in relation to her scheduled activities also formed a central component of the prosecution's case. Court records show she had arranged to meet with investigative journalists from a major publication 3 days after the crash occurred. She had indicated she was prepared to provide comprehensive documentation regarding systematic financial improprieties involving several major industry figures confirmed. A journalist who had been in contact with Stone, she described her evidence as industry-changing. Some trial observers have suggested the circumstances point to a deliberate attempt to silence a potential whistleblower. The evidence presented shows classic patterns associated with preemptive action against someone preparing to expose significant wrongdoing, testified a former federal investigator specializing in financial crimes. The sequence of events from intimidation to isolation to elimination follows a recognizable progression seen in other cases involving high-stakes financial exposures. The medical evidence presented during the trial raised further questions about the crash itself. The nature and pattern of injuries observed during examination are inconsistent with the reported crash dynamics, stated the forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy. Several indicators suggest the victim may have been unconscious or incapacitated prior to impact. This finding directly contradicts the scenario of a driver losing control. Additionally, first responders noted unusual security protocols implemented. Almost immediately at the scene, we were instructed to limit media access to an extraordinary degree, recalled one emergency worker during testimony. In my 20 years responding to accidents, I've never seen that level of information control for what was supposedly a routine traffic incident. The absence of expected documentation from the scene has troubled investigators from the beginning. Modern vehicles of this caliber typically have multiple recording systems beyond the standard. Black explained, an automotive forensic specialist during the trial. Yet several of these systems were either missing entirely or showed evidence of data corruption, focused specifically on the time frame immediately surrounding the crash. This selective loss of data suggested to prosecutors a deliberate attempt to eliminate evidence rather than random damage from the impact. The trial revealed a pattern of professional isolation that Stone experienced after beginning her financial inquiries. According to testimony from her former manager, there was a noticeable change in how the industry responded to her after she started asking questions about accounting practices. Despite continued commercial success, she was systematically excluded from industry events and opportunities. This is consistent with how the industry typically responds to those who challenge its financial structures. As the trial progressed, connections emerged between Stone's case and other artists who had experienced unusual circumstances after challenging industry financial practices. There's a discernible pattern that emerges when you examine cases like Whitney Houston, Bobby Christina, and now Angie Stone, noted an industry analyst who testified as an expert witness. Each began asking difficult questions about money, each faced increasing isolation, and each met untimely ends under circumstances that raise significant questions. Industry experts testifying for the prosecution suggested these cases reflect a troubling approach to managing artists who challenge established power structures. The industry has historically employed various methods to protect its financial interests when challenged, testified a former music executive with decades of experience. These methods range from contractual penalties to professional blacklisting, but this case suggests the possibility of more extreme measures when billions in revenue are at stake. Perhaps the most explosive testimony came when the prosecutor introduced evidence linking Davis to other suspicious deaths in the industry. Former associates of Luther Vandross and Barry White have come forward with testimony that both artists had confronted Davis about royalty discrepancies shortly before their deaths, revealed a forensic accountant who analyzed financial records. In each case, the artists were preparing to take legal action regarding what they believed were systematic accounting irregularities. A former colleague of Barry White testified Barry tried to warn other artists about what he had discovered. He specifically reached out to Luther Vandross to share his concerns. Both men died before they could pursue their claims. This testimony aligned with statements from other industry professionals who described a pattern of convenient deaths among artists who challenged financial practices following Stone's death. Unusual activities at her residence raised additional concerns. Within 48 hours, her home studio had been emptied of recording equipment and documentation, testified a security guard familiar with the property. This occurred before any official estate proceedings had begun. This rapid removal of potential evidence suggested to investigators a coordinated effort to eliminate documentation that might have supported Stone's claims. Digital evidence played a crucial role in the prosecution's case. Stone's social media accounts showed unusual activity patterns immediately following reports of her death. Posts, specifically mentioning financial discrepancies, were deleted within hours of the crash being reported, testified a digital forensics expert. This required access to her accounts that should not have been available to anyone but Stone herself. The selective nature of the deletions, focusing exclusively on content related to financial claims, suggested a targeted effort to eliminate specific information rather than general account management. The absence of surveillance footage along the route where the crash occurred presented another unusual circumstance. This particular stretch of road represents one of the few areas in the region without traffic or security cameras, noted the lead investigator. During testimony, the statistical probability of randomly selecting precisely this location for a drive is extremely low, raising questions about whether Stone was directed to this area for a specific purpose. The technical aspects of the vehicle failure formed a central element of the prosecution's case. Automotive experts testified that the specific nature of the brake system failure was inconsistent with typical mechanical issues. Modern vehicles employ redundant braking systems specifically designed to prevent catastrophic failure, explained a vehicle safety specialist. During the trial, the particular pattern of failure observed in this case is virtually impossible without deliberate compromise of multiple safety systems simultaneously. This is not something that occurs through random mechanical failure. As the trial proceeded, financial evidence revealed significant motivations for preventing Stone's planned disclosures. The royalty practices she was investigating potentially impact billions in revenue across the industry, testified a financial analyst specializing in entertainment accounting. Her documentation threatened to expose systematic practices that have diverted substantial sums from artists to executives and corporations over decades. This financial motivation provided what prosecutors described as compelling reason to prevent her from sharing her findings with journalists and potentially initiating legal proceedings. The trial took an unexpected turn when evidence emerged connecting Davis to Sean Diddy Combs.
That the subject has got to sink to that level that they want help.
Clive is the most evil man in music, stated one veteran producer, while another noted Clive be one of the occult members in Hollywood. Diddy is small fry compared to man like Clive. He be one of them, the Bohemian Grove boss. These statements align with testimony presented during the trial regarding Davis's extraordinary influence within industry power structures. Could I be attracted to the person and not the gender? And I did find that I could be attracted, to a man. Particularly troubling were allegations that emerged during the trial regarding financial exploitation. Clive Davis has murdered Lutherberry Whitney, and who knows how many others he lusts for men, artists, and their royalties, stated one former studio executive in written testimony. He wants any artist life insurance policies and artists' royalties. Greed is what fuels the industries, and the owners will do anything to continue with their greed at any cost. The connection to Diddy has raised questions about whether this conviction might impact ongoing cases against Combs. If Davis was truly the mentor teaching these methods to Diddy, this could significantly expand the scope of the current investigations, noted one legal expert. Following both cases, the prosecution may now have a roadmap for understanding the broader systems that enable these alleged abuses to continue for decades. Former associates of Combs have reportedly begun cooperating with authorities following Davis's conviction. Several individuals previously reluctant to come forward are now providing information connecting Davis and Combs to a larger network of industry figures engaged in similar practices, revealed one source close to the investigation. The fear that previously silenced these witnesses appears to be diminishing now that one of the most powerful figures has been successfully prosecuted. As the industry absorbs the implications of this verdict, questions remain about whether other cases might be re-examined in light of these revelations. The pattern of suspicious circumstances surrounding artists who challenge financial structures may receive renewed scrutiny based on the evidence and testimony presented in this landmark case. Federal prosecutors have reportedly expanded their investigation to include several other high-profile industry executives connected to both Davis and combines this case has opened a window into practices that have been shielded from accountability for decades, stated one former federal investigator familiar with the expanded inquiry. What we're seeing is potentially just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how power and control have been exercised within the entertainment industry. The impact extends beyond this single case. This verdict has fundamentally altered the power dynamics within the industry, notes one music business analyst. Artists now have precedent for legal recourse when faced with intimidation for questioning financial practices, potentially leading to greater transparency in how revenue is distributed. This case ultimately represents more than justice for Angie Stone. It signals a potential shift in how the entertainment industry operates and how it responds to those who challenge established financial patterns. The message is clear: even the most powerful figures can be held accountable when they cross certain lines, as prosecutors look toward related cases, including ongoing investigations, into combines. The roadmap established in the Davis trial provides a template for how to approach deeply entrenched power structures. The Davis verdict demonstrates that with sufficient evidence and courageous witnesses, even decades-old systems of control can be dismantled, observed one prosecutor familiar with both cases. This may be just the beginning of a much larger reckoning within the entertainment industry. As this chapter closes with Davis beginning his sentence, many observers are asking whether this represents the beginning of a broader reckoning within an industry long known for protecting its own interests at all costs. Will other cases will be reopened? Will more artists come forward with similar experiences? And most importantly, will this verdict lead to fundamental changes in how the industry handles those who question its financial practices? The answers to these questions will unfold in the coming months and years, but one thing is certain: the music industry will never be quite the same after this watershed moment in entertainment history.